Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
A few minutes after an airplane crashed into the World Trade Center on September 11th, television shows were interrupted to provide us with news reports. But these news reports were repeated over and over, day after day, without interruption.
And show it to you again.
We were told that Osama was responsible, and his photo was shown to us over and over. But how could a few men defeat our air defense system, and with 4 different airplanes? We were told that fire caused the towers and Building 7 to disintegrate.
Show it to you again.
But fire had never caused a steel building to disintegrate before, so how did fire do it to 3 buildings on September 11th? And why didn't they show the collapse of Building 7 over and over? Why were some events repeated endlessly while others were ignored? Well, at least the FBI solved the crime within a few days and released the names and photos of the 19 hijackers. Unfortunately, news reports were soon complaining that some of these hijackers were alive. Has this crime really been solved?
Thanks for tuning into the program. You're watching The Connie Bryan Show, and tonight I have a very special episode to bring you. So if possible, please gather your family around the television because you don't want to miss this episode tonight. I've got a very special author who lives in Santa Barbara who wrote a book about 911 called Painful Questions, who's agreed to come on the program with me, and so I'm very honored to have Eric+hufschmid with me here in the studio.
Well, it's great to have a little exposure here in Santa Barbara.
I am just thrilled because for some time I have wanted to get an author on the program. I was hoping I might could get David Ray Griffin. I heard you on George and Ori's show, Coast to Coast. And
yeah, of course, they were just trying to criticize.
They were just trying to. I wanted to scream because that's right. They were. He wasn't letting you really explain yourself like I'm going to in this full hour tonight. It's going to be devoted to this topic because, as you were just saying before we rolled tape, there's so much secrecy surrounding this issue. And let me just ask you before we do the little quiz for the viewers. Why do you think it is that the majority of Americans have such a hard time digesting this information?
Well, there's 2 problems. One is that a lot of the information never made it out. A lot of the information like that's in my book never made it out to the public. Mm-hmm. The ordinary media people like KEYT or the news press, all they provide you with mainly is Hollywood gossip and a few simple crimes. They don't go into the details. They don't show what really happened. Right. And then if they do go into it, if anyone does, it upsets people.
And that's
so
what I'm
much.
asking. What do you think it is that upsets people, that causes them to put up a wall? I've run into this when I try to explain to people the holes that we find so readily in the story we've been told that indicates that it's probably an inside job what happened on 911. Why is it that people just glaze over and they're resistant to the information?
It's hard to figure this out. It seems to be a personality thing. When I look at who can deal with it and who can't, it seems to be personality rather than education or intelligence. Or
do you think it also could be that as you digest this, you can't help but realize what we're going to share tonight does show that the story we've been told is wrong? So when you come to that conclusion, you're forced to accept the fact that our country is extraordinarily...
Well, it's like a corrupt, there's a corrupt gang within our government, like a fungus.
Thank you. In other words, you're forced to accept that. You're forced to face something that is very
unpleasant.
Very unpleasant, very scary. Let's get right to the quiz for everyone. And of course, that would be when you ask folks on the street. If I were to ask my viewers right now, look at the model here on the desk. Regarding the World Trade Center on 911, how many buildings fell? What's the answer that most people give, Eric?
2.
2. They say 2, right? Our cameraman just said 2. That's not true. 3 buildings fell. You want to take it from there?
Yeah, the third one is not showing in this model. It's about the height of this DVD, right about this location. It's called Building 7. It's part of the complex, but it's across the street from this building, which is building number 6, and it collapsed at about 5:30 in the evening. And it's 47 stories. It's a steel-framed building. It was shown on television perhaps once or twice. A few people saw it, but most of the media ignored it. Most people don't even know it.
No plane crashed into building number 7. 2 planes, of course, each hit the towers, and that's the reason that everybody just accepts that the towers just fell down like they were a house of cards, basically. Could you take on that topic? Never before in the history of architecture has a steel building come down for fire.
And Fire Engineering magazine wrote about this. In fact, they were even in January of 2002. The Fire Engineering magazine, which goes out to fire departments, was complaining about, you don't have steel buildings falling down from fire. Plus, they were complaining that they were throwing the rubble away. They're selling it as scrap metal to China and North Korea, and they said you can't do that either. So we've got them complaining that fire doesn't bring steel buildings down. You're not allowed to destroy the rubble. They're violating the law. People don't know that either.
Right, and a lot of people are probably wondering what's he talking about. They cleaned up the evidence so fast that nobody can go in. No experts can go in.
No, you're right. After the buildings fell down, this was a crime scene. The police should have roped it off and said, "Stay away," because we've got to inspect it. We've got to get photographs. Right. Then we've got to look at why did these buildings fall down. If they fell down because of fire, especially Building 7, which was not hit by an airplane,
Everybody who works in a steel building would be very
you'd
concerned.
be terrified. You think, what's going to happen to my building? If Building 7 can fall down for no apparent reason, we ought to look at what was wrong here. Who designed this building? But they didn't. They just picked the rubble up, sold it as scrap metal, and meanwhile we got Fire Engineering magazine saying, "Stop it, this is against the law." And they're saying, "Please send messages to your congressman and tell them to stop." They're just ignored.
Okay, so Building 7 comes down around 5 in the afternoon.
5:30, it just drops.
It drops.
And then just completely pulverizes itself. It doesn't just break into a couple pieces. It's completely pulverized.
So now, for a few minutes here, and we do want to keep this succinct and move along quickly because there's so much information, but I do think we need to take a few minutes and talk about this issue of how the buildings came down, because that is one of the most compelling areas to show that this is wrong what we've been told.
Right. The best thing is to watch the video of Building 7 come down. When you see this building drop,
we'll show that.
It looks exactly like a demolition of an old office building. It's got the telltale signs of dust, little bits of dust coming out at the corners and the windows. And it's got the dust at the bottom, at the base of the building.
It comes straight down into its own footprint. Which is
yes.
exactly... The middle comes in, the sides come falling in.
Right, the inside of the building fell first. You can see the very top part, at the top of the building that had some air conditioning and other equipment, that fell inside the building first. And so what the inside of the building gets sucked in, the outside fell on top of it. And if you look at the rubble and the photographs, after this building fell, you look at the rubble, you can see the outside of the building has fallen on top of the rubble. And this is exactly what controlled demolitions do.
They're designed to do that. They're designed to... There's a company that actually brags about the fact that it'll make your building come down with the steel cut such that... broken such that it'll fit on your truck.
Yeah, they've gotten it down. It's perfected. So that when you bring a steel building down, or any office building, they'll bring it down without bothering the neighboring buildings, and all of it's in nice little pieces.
Right. And so I'm glad you discussed that about Building 7, but if we could back up and let the viewers know about how before 7 fell, the World Trade Center built, the other 2 buildings, the tallest 2, the North and South Tower, came down the same way, pretty much the same way.
They were similar, except that they were coming down, they started like the North Tower started about higher up, and the South Tower was a little bit lower down, but they both have the same characteristic of
coming down into their own footprints.
Right, and most important is when they finally hit the ground, there are no pieces left of the building. There's nothing but steel. Individual
and the steel
pieces.
is all broken, as opposed to, like in David Ray Griffin's book, he makes a point of saying those core columns